Hello and welcome to the English Box. Today we're going to do a comprehensive tense review in which we're going to analyze and discuss the 12 different tenses in the English language, from the present simple all the way through to the future perfect continuous. So starting at the beginning, we're going to look at the present simple. The present simple is used to talk about facts or habitual actions. And the structure is as follows. We have the subject, which can be a real noun or a pronoun, such as I, you, he, she, it, we, or they, which is then followed by the verb and often a complement. The verb in third person, with he, she, or it, always has an S, unless it is a modal verb. Then we have the form in negative. In negative, it's very important to remember to use the auxiliary don't in negative, or in third person, doesn't. And finally, the question form, you have to remember to use the auxiliary do or does in third person at the beginning, and to invert the subject and the auxiliary. Moving on to the present continuous. We use the present continuous to talk about temporary situations or actions in process happening in this moment. We can also use it for planned actions in the future when we use a time expression with this tense. And so we form or structure this tense in the following way. We have the subject, I, you, we, he, she, it, or they, then the verb to be in its conjugated form. This is the auxiliary in the present continuous. Then the verb plus ing, and then the complement. So for example, I am working at the moment. In negative, we make the auxiliary to be negative. So am not, aren't, or isn't in the contracted form. And this is followed by, like in the positive form, the verb plus ing. In the question, you have to invert the auxiliary, the verb to be, and the subject. So am I, are you, or is he? For example, are you working at the moment? The past simple has a similar structure to the present simple, but you have to add ed to regular verbs in the positive to put it into the past tense. And you have to be careful here because there are many irregular verbs in English. In negative, instead of don't in the present, we use didn't. And this is the same in every person, first person, second person, and third person. I didn't work last weekend. The infinitive is used after didn't. And in a question, the question has to begin with the auxiliary did. Then the subject, then the verb, and then the complement. Did you work last weekend? Okay, this is to talk about actions that are completed and have no particular relationship to the present. The past continuous. The past continuous, again, a similar structure to the present continuous, but instead of using am, is, or are, we use was and were in the auxiliary. For example, I was working at 5 yesterday. Negative, we make the auxiliary negative, the verb to be. I wasn't working at 5 yesterday. And in a question, we have to invert the subject and the auxiliary verb. So the auxiliary verb comes first. Was I working at 5 yesterday? Or were you working at 5 yesterday, for example? But when do we use this tense? Well, we use this tense to talk about actions happening at a certain point in the past. We also use it to talk about background events in a story, for example, actions happening simultaneously at the same time, and interrupted actions. I was walking along the street when my father called me, for example. So moving on now to the future tenses. We have the future simple. Here you have two options, with will or with going to. So with will, you just need to use will as the auxiliary. I will work next weekend, which is then followed by the infinitive. But you can also use going to. I am going to work next weekend. In many situations, these are quite interchangeable. You can use both. But we normally use will for spontaneous decisions and going to for planned actions. So when you're talking about your plans for the weekend, you say, I'm going to. I'm going to play football. I'm going to meet friends, for example. In negative, you make the auxiliaries negative. So I won't work next weekend, will not, or he isn't going to work next weekend. So you make the verb to be negative here with going to. In a question, you have to invert the subject and the auxiliary. Will you work next weekend? Are you going to work next weekend? Okay, moving on. The future continuous. We use the future continuous to talk about actions happening at a certain point in the future. For example, I will be working, or I am going to be working at 5 o'clock tomorrow. In negative, I won't be working, or he isn't going to be working, for example. And in the question, the inversion is necessary again. Will you be working, or are you going to be working? Tense number 7 is the present perfect simple. Now this tense causes many problems for people learning English. And we use this tense when we are talking about an action or a state that started in the past and is still true in the present. We also use it for actions that happened in the past but have a present consequence, and to talk about life experiences. It's very important that we don't use time expressions that express a finished action. So, ago, for example. You can say, I've been to America, but you can't say, I've been to America 2 years ago. Then you'd say, I went to America. To form this tense, as you can see, we have the subject, then the auxiliary have, or very importantly, has in third person, and then the past participle, the third column of the verb. In negative, you make the auxiliary negative, haven't or hasn't. And in the question, you have to begin or start the question with have or has. Has for third person. The present perfect continuous is also used to describe actions that started in the past and continue in the present, but we concentrate a little bit more on the duration of the action. We talk about how long we have done something or we have been doing something with the present perfect continuous. We form this with the subject, the auxiliary have or has, the verb to be and past participle, been, plus the verb with ing, the present participle. I have been working, he has been working. In negative, we use haven't or hasn't. And in the question, we have to begin the question with have, or in third person, has. The past perfect simple. We use this to talk about actions or states that occurred or happened or were true before a certain point in the past, often in conjunction with the past simple. So I had worked, I hadn't worked in negative, and had you worked in question form. The past perfect simple is used to describe an action that's just finished before another action in the past. I had been working when my father arrived home. For example, means I just finished when he arrived home, or his arrival stopped me working. I wanted to talk to him. So I had been working, subject, auxiliary, the verb to be in past participle, and then the present participle. I had been working. In negative, I hadn't been working. And as a question, had you been working? Only 2 more tenses to go. We have the future perfect simple. This is used to talk about actions that finish before a certain point in the future. So, for example, I will have worked in positive, the subject, auxiliary, have, and the past participle. In negative, I won't have worked. And the question, will you have worked? So I will have worked for 8 hours by the time it's time to finish work, for example. Okay, the future perfect continuous. Again, in a similar way to the past perfect continuous, this is to describe an action that just finishes before another point in the future. I will have been working, I won't have been working in negative, and will you have been working as a question. To give you an example, if I can think of one, maybe a little bit better than my last example for the future perfect simple. I will have been working when my father arrives home at 5 o'clock. Means that maybe I would have been working for 8 hours when my father arrives home at 5 o'clock. Okay, that's the final tense. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to see a tutorial on how to use the English box, click in the orange box just there. Otherwise, I'll see you next time.